All right, let's get right into it. We're going to talk about one of the biggest, most fundamental disagreements in politics today, our economic freedoms. And to really get it, we have to look at the 400-year-old source code that's, believe it or not, still running the whole show.
So let's just start with the biggest question of all, the one at the very heart of everything. Your right to own property, to start a business, the freedom to choose your job. Are those rights you were just born with? Things that exist before any government comes along? Or are they inventions, created by the government, defined by things like laws and tax codes? Seriously, how you answer that one question, it changes everything.
And that question is exactly why our political debates about the economy feel so, well, broken, right? It's like two sides are speaking completely different languages, just yelling past each other. So this explainer, which is based on some fantastic research by Bradley R. Brewer, is all about figuring out why that's happening.
So here's the modern deadlock in a nutshell. On one side, you've got thinkers like John Tomasi. He argues that strong economic liberties are just as basic as, say, freedom of speech. They're fundamental human rights. But on the other side, you've got Liam Murphy and Thomas Nagel, and they're saying, whoa, hold on. They argue that these rights are really just legal conventions, kind of like traffic laws. Yeah, they're useful, but they're things we invented.
You gotta wonder, how can smart people look at the exact same world and come to such wildly different conclusions? Well, to figure that out, we can't just look at them. We've got to go back, way back. We need to look at the philosophical source code their arguments are built on.
So where's this source code from? Well, it was mostly written back in the 17th century by two absolute heavyweights of political philosophy, Thomas Hobbes and John Locke. A good way to think about them is as the creators of two totally different, competing operating systems for how society should work.
First up, we've got Thomas Hobbes. For Hobbes, the state of nature, what life is like before government, is just awful. It's a non-stop war of everyone against everyone else. There are no rules, no property, no such thing as justice. The only thing that matters is staying alive, which means you have a right to do absolutely anything you need to do to survive, even if it means hurting someone else.
And this leads to maybe the most famous line in all of political philosophy. Without a powerful government to keep everyone in line, life is just, well, it's solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. That's the Hobbesian world. It's a pretty bleak starting point.
But then you've got John Locke, and he starts from a completely different place. For him, the state of nature isn't chaos at all. It's a state of perfect freedom that's already governed by a natural law from God. Locke believed the world has a rational order, and we can all use our reason to figure it out. And that law basically says, don't mess with other people's life, liberty, or property. It's an orderly world even before any government shows up.
So here's the absolute key difference, how they see the law itself. For Hobbes, you start out with total chaotic freedom. So every law the government makes is what he calls an external impediment. It literally takes away a piece of that freedom in order to give you some security. But for Locke, it's the complete opposite. Law doesn't take away liberty, it creates it. Without rules, there's no real freedom, just the constant fear of violence. Law is what creates a safe space for liberty to actually mean something.
And this, right here, is the big insight from Brewer's work that just unlocks the whole puzzle. These aren't just two slightly different opinions. We're talking about two completely opposite logical directions for the relationship between liberty and law.
Okay, so the Hobbesian logic flows like this. Liberty comes first. You start with this huge, wide-open ocean of total freedom. Then, law comes along later and puts up fences and barriers restricting it. Liberty exists first, and law's job is to chip away at it.
The Lockean logic, on the other hand, flows in the exact opposite direction. You start with law, the rules of the game, and it's only because those rules are there in the first place that you can have any kind of real, meaningful liberty. For Locke, law has to come first, and liberty is a product of it.
Okay, so we've got our historical source code now, Hobbes and Locke. So let's plug that back into the modern debate we started with and see what happens. This is the part where it all starts to click.
And what you find is you can map this logic directly. The Hobbesian logic, liberty then law, flows straight to John Tomasi. And the Lockean logic, law then liberty, flows straight to Nagel and Murphy. It's like they've inherited these 400-year-old operating systems without even knowing it.
So what does this actually mean for their arguments? Well, it means John Tomasi is basically running that Hobbesian operating system. He's making a moral case that our economic freedoms are fundamental rights that exist before the government ever gets involved. But Nagel and Murphy, they're running a Lockean program. They're arguing that things like private property or income literally don't exist without a complex legal system, with taxes and everything, to create and define them first.
And here it is. This is the big reveal. The most crucial point of all is that they aren't really having the same argument at all. They're talking past each other because they're starting from places that are fundamentally incompatible. They are asking two totally different questions, running on two different operating systems.
And Brewer's research gives us a way forward. First, just recognize this difference in their source code. See that Tomasi is asking a philosophical question, what is the moral justification for economic freedom? Meanwhile, Nagel and Murphy are asking a practical, almost legal question. How is economic freedom actually created in our society? One is asking why, and the other is asking how.
So what's the big takeaway here? Look, understanding this source code doesn't tell us who's right and who's wrong. That's not the point. What it does is give us, like, an X-ray of the debate. It lets us see the hidden structure under all the noise and helps us understand why the disagreement is so deep and why it feels like they can never find any common ground.
And that brings us to the final question. A question for you. Which operating system are you running? When you think about your own freedoms, your own rights, do you see law as the thing that creates and protects them, or do you see it as the thing that limits them? Your answer pretty much reveals your own source code.